Here we go again. The Supreme Court of the United States, 9 justices that will decide the fate of how we as Americans will live our lives, has decided to take up another case that's very important to communities of color. And one of the things that I find troublesome about the rationale, and the case what they're taking up is actually going to be affirmative action, was listening to the only black justice on the Supreme Court, Justice Thomas, quote Plessy versus Ferguson. And if you know what Plessy versus Ferguson is the separate but equal case, which kind of made black people second-class citizens within the United States. And I kind of thought it was horrendous that he would even find anything within that case to be quoting to talk about why we shouldn't have affirmative action, because they think it's not a remedy to the discrimination that exists within this country. So let's talk about that particular case that's coming up dealing with the University of Texas.
Well, the case is Abigail Fisher versus the University of Texas, and apparently in 2008 she decided to bring suit against the university because she was denied admission when she was applying. And Texas has a rule where the top 10% of all schools are automatically admitted to public schools, but she apparently missed that 10%, and so she was not admitted. And then after that 10%, then the criteria is based on whatever the university uses. And they had already determined from previous law that they could use the idea of race. You know, they can consider your race in the admissions process, and it's not required, but it is something that is you know, something that you can consider. And although California and Michigan forbid it, you know, outright, and are totally against it, it is still allowed in Texas. And you know, the ruling before was based on the fact that people determined that there are a lot of other criteria that are important. You know, they could look at the essays that you wrote, or they could look at the types of schools that you came from. They could, you know, consider your extracurricular, you know, what you can contribute to the school overall. Besides just the fact that you know, you were increasing the minority quota, so to speak, of the school. So, I mean, it's something that was a positive thing, but now they're trying to turn it into a negative thing because now they're claiming the reverse discrimination, although there's nothing to determine that Ms. Fisher would have been accepted to Texas even without this going on, but she's making it now an issue regarding affirmative action.
I find it quite interesting that they're bringing up this particular lawsuit. They didn't have any problem with them accepting all of these black people to play basketball for the university or football for the university, which they're making millions of dollars for them. There wasn't an issue with them accepting those individuals into the university because they were getting something out of it. But when the university tries to do the right thing and provide some type of diversity to the university so that people can have a broader educational experience and that we don't disenfranchise individuals from a quality education because of the situation they came from. The thing that I find so disingenuous, again, about this whole situation is that people are walking around here with rose-colored glasses on, especially somebody like Clarence Thomas that came up the way he did and doesn't remember that particular history. Because if Clarence Thomas thinks that he was the best solicitor out here, there were many other people that had just as good or better talent than he did that didn't have the opportunity to pursue those talents because of racism. I mean, we just had a great series that was on PBS talking about slavery by another name. And it kind of pointed out some of the things that this society has done to handicap individuals of color. And for something that fantastic to be out of such an excellent series that demonstrates what this country has done to individuals of color, to say that you don't realize that there is some type of personal bias that exists out here and is applied toward everyday life is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I mean, the mere fact that, you know, California and Michigan have forbid it to be used, and their enrollment of blacks and Hispanics has gone down markedly, it shows already that there is a direct relationship between the two. And if people want to try and purport that, you know, racism doesn't exist or that there's no biases when decision making is done, it's actually, like you said, it's not just rose-colored glasses, it's just blatant discrimination, because they have to, if you're not in the position of being discriminated against, you have to actually listen to the people who have an argument with an open mind. And the fact that this has happened for so long, where people have been denied promotions, people have been denied admissions, denied jobs, you know, when they have better qualifications than others, means that it does still exist. And it's a sad thing that we have. I think Justice Roberts, I can't remember the exact quote, but basically what he was saying is that, you know, racial, you know, averaging, you know, trying to equalize the racial makeup of the schools is unconstitutional, and labeling it diversity doesn't make it any, you know, more constitutional. But that's not the point. The point is that I think if they want to try and attack the word diversity, that's one thing. But the issue, like you said, of trying to right the wrongs of discrimination over hundreds of years is a valid point that they can't just ignore.
Well, the problem is there's no diversity of common sense that exists, it seems, in terms of this particular topic. And, you know, it's just like when I thought about, you know, the American Express card, and it has its privileges. And so what I said to that myself when I thought about that, I said, just like the American Express card, white has its privileges. And for white people to say that that does not exist is really ridiculous.
Yeah.
How many studies have we had? How many programs have we seen where you have people of color that have the same qualifications, the same or even better qualifications and stuff, that applied for apartments or whatever and got turned down when they showed up? They might have sounded like if they were a white person, and when they showed up, there was no apartment to be had. Then some, you know, how many times have we seen when we look at this whole banking crisis that existed and how people of color that qualify for better loans were given, you know, these adjustable rate loans versus whites that had less qualifications that were given fixed loans? We have a consistent history that we can point to over and over again where there's been bias and blatant racism, and for the Supreme Court not to acknowledge that and not to acknowledge how blacks have been shut out at some of these universities, not only because of blatant racism, but in terms of someone looking at their information, but about the blatant racism that affects their communities by the way services are being provided to their communities in terms of educational things of that nature, which they don't talk about. Economic discrimination, where people don't have the opportunity to get that extra help that they need.
Yeah, they don't get the proper funding to their schools so that they can succeed, you know, even on the high school level. But, you know, that's why I think there's actually two major issues that are going on here.
Right.
One is, again, the righting of the wrong. Affirmative action exists because there is racism and discrimination that needs to be averaged, you know, or evened out in the process of hiring, you know, education, et cetera. But the other issue is, even I think the appeals court, the judge that was upset that they wouldn't hear Lisa Fisher, Abigail Fisher's case, was saying that, well, are you basically saying that if you don't have more racially diverse people in a math class or whatever, that it's not, you know, it's going to affect, you know, basically affect how the class is taught? Yeah, I really do think it does, because you are going to get a different viewpoint from people from different racial makeups. And that should be, you know, encouraging the cultural diversity and the discussion amongst people from different backgrounds should be something that's encouraged. But it actually points towards the main reason that we still have the problem with the curriculum of inclusion, where there is nothing that we can say to explain to most school, you know, school level before graduate school, that it is important for people of color to know their history and to have it be an integral part of the school books, because it is a part of American history. But you can't convince people about that when they don't think that your history is important enough to have more than just a month.